Since 2013, the yearly release of the Melee Army Top 100 rankings has been an entertaining experience for fans and players alike, who anxiously get to wait to see who makes the cut for the coveted list, and this year has been no different. So now that the entire list has been released, let's take a look at it as a whole and check out the highest ranked newcomers, the players who have risen and fallen the most, and then finally, let's compare my final ballot to the official rankings to see the differences. So for this year's rankings, 22, or nearly a fourth of the ranked players, made their first ever appearance on a top 100 ranking, which shows just how much the competitive community for the game is still growing after all these years. Fourth highest on this list is Spark, who is most known for his win in pools over Westballs at Shine, but also picked up multiple great wins over Nintendo, Smuckers, and Army, just to name a few. Coming in at third highest is Junebug with wins over Cyrox, Cobalt, and Zane, who is also third on the most recent MDVA PR, which is a region that is easily one of the most improved over this last year. Second on the list is Army, the fourth best Ices player in the world, who has wins over prominent foxes like Ice, KJH, and Ryan Ford, despite the fact that many people are grinding the Ices matchup with the rise of Chudat this year. And the highest ranked new player on this year's list, who has quickly become one of my favorite players, Ginger. Early in the year, I did an entire video on his impressive resume after Smash Gun, and since then he's added Westballs, AMSA, Cobalt, and many more to his amazing year that allowed him to make his debut on the top 100 as a top 50 player. There's also a lot of motion this year from players who are no strangers to the top 100, both positively and negatively. Let's first start off with the players that dropped off the most this year. Melee legend Zoo sadly sits at the top of this list of fallen players, dropping 35 spots this year. He's actually dropped in rank every single year the Melee Army ranks have been published since starting out at rank 18 back in 2013. MacD and Chillin have also both been featured in the top 100 since the beginning, but they both have had ups and downs across the years, unlike Zoo. Reno also stands out on this list as he's the only member of the top 5 fallen players to not appear at all on this year's list, so he's been given the benefit of the doubt and considered to be rank 105 due to lack of information. On the brighter side, we saw a lot of players make huge improvements this year, with Zane's jump from 66th to 22nd, aided by his wins over Leffen, Chudat, and SFAT being the largest by number and one of the most impressive. The most impressive jump, in my opinion, comes from New England's Crush, whose fantastic year catapulted him all the way to the middle of the top 20. I say this is more impressive because the skill difference ramps up exponentially when you start moving into the top 20, as being considered better than Westballs, Swedish, and Lucky is monumentally more impressive than being considered better than Mike Hayes, Amza, and Hugs. Now that we've taken an in-depth look at movement in the official top 100, let's compare the final results of the rankings with my ballot to see if we can draw any interesting information from it. Let's first take a look at some of the metrics for my ballot as a whole before we dive more in depth. First off, there are only 4 players that I was able to perfectly rank outside the top 10, with 2 of them coming from the top 20. This 4% accuracy is much lower than what I expected coming into the ballot, but the committee's completely justified decision to remove Mafia from the top 100 despite being on the ballot did slightly hurt my accuracy for players ranked above 52nd. Within the top 10, the only difference was between SFAT and Wizrobe's rank, who are only a tenth of a point away from each other on the ranking. Then, when expanding the accuracy requirements to plus or minus 3 points, my ballot looks a whole lot better with a 43% accuracy, which I hope to improve upon next year if I'm given the opportunity. And when you total up the distance between my ballot and the official ranking for all top 100 players, I underrated players by a net total of 82 ranks. Overall, I feel pretty happy with these results as there are so many different things that are valued by different panelists, one of which I'll get into more later, so nearly getting about half the rankings quote-unquote right for the year is pretty nice. So now let's zoom in a little bit further and take a look at how accurate I was at predicting the 25 of the 125 players in the ballot who would not make the top 100. Here I fared well, only missing 7 out of the 25, overranking 3 and underranking 4. I'm going to quickly comment in retrospect about these rankings, but if you want to see my complete reasoning for these placings, you can check out the VODs for my entire selection process, which I streamed. So let's start off with the players I overrated. As for Ruby, I for sure did overrate him a bit, but I still think he's a top 100 player. For Reeve, it's really a shame he barely missed out despite having a win over SFAT this year, but he really didn't have any depth to his resume of wins, so it's pretty understandable. And I think Bananas was snubbed for a spot in the top 100, but there's no doubt he'll make it next year. My mistake for Eddie Mexico that many of the other ballots didn't make was treating him like an American player instead of an international player, which had significantly increased his ranking, for which I penalized him for lack of attendance. NMW had 0 top 50 wins at regionals and larger, and only 1 win at a local, so I completely stand by my choice to not include him in the top 100. And for Zoo and Lovage, let's move on to the second to last section of this video, which discusses legacy players. For me, a legacy player is someone who receives a significant benefit of doubt of their current skill by panelists and fans alike because of the impressive legacy that they've built up with their talented performances throughout their many years in the community. These 5 players I've listed here with their rankings since 2013 are the ones who I think best illustrate how a player's legacy can affect their ranking. When creating my ballot, I made a conscious effort to make sure I only take into consideration a player's results from this year, which is apparent by every single ranking of mine being at least 10 ranks higher than the official rankings. I personally don't agree with the balloter's choice to factor legacy into a player's ranking, as I believe a player should just be ranked by the results from said year, but I also don't think it's too huge of an issue that changes in the ballot process should be done to avoid it. And lastly, let's finish off this video by taking a look at the most over and underrated players on my ballot, starting with the players I overrated. I first off have to acknowledge that 2 of these players, Absent Page and Darktooth, are both players I made videos on, and that for sure made me biased in their direction because of my deeper knowledge of their 2017. I do think Absent Page was harshly underrated by the public as a whole though, and deserves to be at least in the 60 to 70 range. As for the other 4, I think they suffered lower rankings than I expected from a lack of visibility in the community, which is sadly a necessary consequence when a ballot selection process is used, and people aren't often able to put as much time into the ballots as they want for various reasons. As for the players I underrated, we've already discussed why Zoo, Eddie Mexico, and Lovage ended up here. But for Kalamazoo, his low ranking was probably the biggest mistake I made on my ballot, as he had wins over Lucky and Hugs at regionals this year, which by themselves should have at least made him a top 80 player. As for Trillium, I think my ranking for him was pretty fair, as he had a favorable record against a little more than half of the other candidates, and his only top 100 win was against Prince Abu at Gommel. And that about ends off this video. This second half of this video was a little different from what I normally do. It was more of a retrospective on my rankings and going back and looking how good I did in my ballot and giving more of a public showing of what my ballot did, where I did wrong, what I think I did right. Kind of going back and not really justifying myself to the community, but I feel like this would just be interesting to share and get in the mindset of someone who had a ballot and was doing this for the first time, sort of just getting that experience and sharing it with you guys. And looking at that, do you agree with my retrospective coming back and looking at it? Did I let myself eat off easily somewhere, or did I completely gloss over someone and I should have overranked them, or I ranked them too high, ranked them too low? I'd love to hear what you guys think. And also, more of a specific question I want to throw to you guys, because I have a very strong opinion. I didn't go into it further, but I don't think legacy should be considered at all when ranking players. And I was really surprised that, especially Zoo was the one I was most surprised that Zoo seems like a great guy and he follows me on Twitter, but I don't think he should have been ranked that high at all. Neither do I think Homemade Waffles or Lovage or I think DJ was close to a good spot. DJ actually had a surprisingly good year, but Lovage and Chillin had a pretty good year. He beat Chew twice, so he was a little bit harder to rank, but I definitely don't think Zoo, Homemade Waffles, and Lovage should have been ranked that high. I think they were, legacy was considered way too much. But I'd love to hear what you guys think, either pro legacy, against legacy, and what your reasoning is either way. And also, who do you think was stumped the most? Are you going to agree with the meme that Shark should have made the top 100? Looking back at it, I didn't look super deep at Shark's ranking, but I probably shouldn't have been top 100, but that's my opinion to have. You guys can keep memeing in the comments or not, or say Eichelman maybe should have been top 100. He definitely should not be top 100 this year. And so going into the general stuff, follow me over on Twitter for video previews. I put up that new players to the rankings up a couple days early. That got passed around Twitter a lot. I was really happy about that. You can sub me over on Twitch now. The emote is live. You can see my beautiful face when you sub over on Twitch. I currently have 2 subscribers, so if you want to be an early adopter of the SaveAsUntitled brand, get in on there. Or if you're more of a Patreon guy, give me $1 or more over on Patreon and you get videos a couple of days early. You'll get the suggest video topics and other stuff. I'm going to post my full Excel sheet of all my rankings over on Patreon for all my Patreon supporters. So if that's something you'd be interested in, maybe just support me for this month. I would hope you wouldn't just do this month, but support me for a little bit and you can get access to that Excel sheet and other little fun stuff like that. Last thing, there's another video that should be coming out later this week, previewing Genesis 5, players I think you should be looking out for, and making my prediction on who I think's going to win. So that's about it. I've been SaveAsUntitled, and I'll see you guys next time.